Hello, everyone, and welcome to this exciting conversation about how human design can help you on your parenting journey. And I know that I've sent out the invitation to many of you personally because I was like, you simply need to know about this because this is so exciting. And I'm going to introduce this a little more, but I'm also just going to say, even though you're not a parent of small children, and even if you're not a parent at all, this is just perfect for you anyhow, because we're all child of someone, so we can all learn about our own parents and us as a child, that dynamic, and it's gonna help us immensely. And I say that from my own experience. It's gonna help us immensely in our journey as human beings and in coming into very harmonious relationships, or as harmonious as we can make them. So I love seeing people jump on here. Venera, welcome. Carrie, so good to have you with us. And I can see you writing in the chat, so I didn't have time to look at that yet. So I know there are a few who are new to me, so I'm just going to say a few words about that and how I came about the inviting Sophie for the human design conversation, and then I will let her introduce herself and get started. So I can just say a few words about me. I'm Matilda Lurchi. I'm a healer and spiritual guide, you can say, a coach, life coach, using higher wisdom, intuition. I teach healing modalities for children. I work a lot with children myself, with parents. Many of you here are students on my program where you learn to become a healer. And that is so fun and amazing, such a fun and amazing journey. What we're focusing on is how to assist children in expressing their authentic self, their true nature, coming back, becoming who they intended to become, that very person that they are at their core. This means without the conditioning, without the traumas. It means their true self. And we also call it the soul self, what they bring in. So the first time I stumbled across human design, what really struck me was this here was a system that was actually showing just that, showing what is the true authentic nature of these children. And I know for myself that I could feel it. I'm greatly clairsentient, and I know many of you are. So I could feel all this thing and I could communicate it to the parents. But here was a system where you as a parent could actually go in and check with all your children, or you as an adult could go in and check you and your parents. And you can just get this very beautiful overview about your whole family and map it out. I do it with my collaborators as well. It was so fun. Sophie, of course, asked me to send her my info as well, so she could do it, because she is so excited about what she's doing as well, because it helps us so much in relationships and co-creations. But I think that's enough about me, because what we're really here for is to hear from Sophie. So I will hand it over to you, Sophie, to introduce yourself and just get started.
Amazing, thank you. So I just want to check with you, Matilda. I'll share my screen in a moment just so I can take everybody through that process again of where to get your chart and the three things that we're going to focus on. Because when you look at human design, there's a lot of things and it can be a bit overwhelming at first. But before we do that, my name's Sophie. As Matilda said, I live in Thailand. If you can't tell from my accent, it's a little bit mixed, but I'm originally from the UK. I've been in Thailand on and off 20 years, but in the location I'm in now, in an island called Phuket, I've been here for 7 years. I have a almost 2-year-old son. He's going to be 2 at the beginning of October, which, you know, those of you that are parents or grandparents or just have children in your life, you know that old cliche that time just goes so fast. And I've been into my own kind of human design experiment. I first came into contact with human design in 2011 when I was going through my Saturn return, which is this kind of period in your life where you're sort of astrologically kind of thrust into adulthood. I was so conditioned at that point that I kind of rejected it. I was like, no, I don't want to hear this. You know, when you get something that's kind of quite truthful, but you're like, no, I don't want to hear it and I don't want to change. And that was my experience at that time. It kind of came back into my life a few years later. I started using human design with my clients. I'm also a hypnotherapist, NLP and EFT practitioner, and shamanic healer. And I started incorporating human design with my clients here at wellness centers in Thailand because I was realizing I was kind of doing it in the background because it gives me this visual map. As Matilda said, it's one of these things. I think that's why a lot of people resonate with it so much, because many of us are visual learners, and it does give us this snapshot, this map of the body, of to sort of like, where we're defined, so where we have this consistent strengths and where we're open to vulnerability and conditioning. And I was finding when I was doing things like hypnotherapy that I was able to kind of almost accept, or my clients were able to sort of accelerate their process, because I was really able to sort of pinpoint, where they might have a vulnerable area, or where they might be conditioned in an area that should actually be like a strength of theirs. So I just found that really fascinating. After I had my son, it just kind of became a very natural thing for me to then move into applying that for parents to, I was working as a therapist with so many people, helping them to undo childhood patterns, conditioning from their childhood. And I was like, well, what if they just didn't get conditioned in the first place? So this is my desire, my vision, is to reach as many parents as possible to help them, to understand their children, to understand how they are different from their children is really key as well. And so hopefully our children don't get conditioned too much and don't need to go through like years of therapy later on in life, as many of us have done as adults. One of the things I find is quite common when someone becomes a parent is, I think one of two things happens. Depending on how your own childhood was, it might have been good. And so you might think, oh, I'm just going to kind of parent from that perspective and sort of recreate the kind of childhood I had because that worked for me and I've turned out well. Or we had a not so great childhood and we kind of really like, I'm going to do everything differently and I'm going to do complete opposite. And I feel that I love this new era of conscious parenting. And I love that so many of us have developed this awareness of, maybe what didn't work so well in our childhood. And we've just got this deeper self-awareness. However, there's this challenge sometimes that whilst we're trying to heal and reparent ourselves from what wasn't so good in our childhood, we're not always aware of exactly what our child needs and the fact that those things might be very different. So we've almost gone, if the pendulum swung all the way this way, and we're like, well, that didn't work. Sometimes we run the risk of like swinging totally in the other direction, and that might not be what our child needs. The beauty of human design is that it shows us who we are. As Matilda said, it's known often as the blueprint of our soul. It doesn't change. It's not like a personality test like Enneagram or Myers-Briggs, which can change as you go through different stages of your life, which is kind of different aspects of your personality might come out. It's not a personality test. This is something that it's very important for your human design to know the time of birth as close as possible, particularly when we're looking at children and we're going into some of the deeper layers and we're looking at things like what's the correct dietary regimen for them and things like that, because these aspects change quite like every few minutes. So it just gives us this amazing map of who we are, of who we're designed to be. So as Matilda said, we can really raise our children or our grandchildren or students, whatever realm you're working with children and even yourself, to really be our authentic self, to really be who our soul came here to be, instead of who we think we should be or, who society tells us to be. In terms of parenting, I find that it really can help parents to understand where there might be friction in a relationship, either between themselves and their child or between two siblings, for example. It can help the parent to understand what their energetic needs are and what support they might need around that, and then what their child has. For example, my child he's 2, okay, so there's different stages of development, but my child has a lot of energy. I know that, I can see that, and then I can, instead of going, oh my God, why can't I keep up? Like, I can understand myself and how we're different in that respect. And I can then, take strategies and practical tips so that I can actually manage it so that we're both doing well, right? So I'm not self-sacrificing at the expense of my son. So I really feel like, human design kind of just is this extra key or puzzle piece to conscious parenting that can help us to, as parents, to understand who we are and possibly where we need to heal based on, what our true essence is, for us to get back in alignment with our own authenticity, and also to help us understand our child and their uniqueness. It's called the science of differentiation for a reason, because we are so uniquely different. And that's why sometimes when you look at a human design chart, it can be very overwhelming at first, because there are so many different aspects that make that up what it is. It's a combination of astrology, Western astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu Brahmin chakra system, the Kabbalah. Am I missing anything? I think that's a lot of them. And so there's all of these different numbers and shapes and colors. And I want to just take you through three of the most important things today, that really the foundational pieces of human design, so that you can understand those and so that you know how to apply those on a day-to-day basis. Because if we just have the knowledge without the application, it's just, floating around in our head. It's really about being able to apply it on a day-to-day basis, experimenting with it, see what works for you. The whole purpose of human design is it is about experimentation. These are the kind of strategies around it, but it's up to you to experiment with it and see what works for you. So those are the things that I want to share with you today, really what those three foundational pieces are. If you are interested to learn more and dive deeper, then I just started doing a blog. I post on Instagram. I have an ebook. I've got lots and lots of other resources that are available if you want to dive deeper. But I just want today to introduce you to it, to focus on those kind of three core pieces. And then I would really love to open this up to answer your questions.
Perfect,
Okay.
Sophie. Do you need me to make you host for you to be able to
share
share?
the screen. Yeah,
Yes.
that would be great. Just because, again, I think a lot of us are visual learners, and or any kind of learning style we have, if we can incorporate as many things as possible, then we can really sort of, all get the most out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share my screen, which I believe Matilda had probably sent this to you guys. Just move that one up there. So this is a blog post that I wrote recently. And this is really kind of, again, a visual how to read a human design chart. Okay. So those of you, I can't see the chat right now in case anyone comments, but I'll check back in again when I stop screen sharing, or Matilda can prompt me if anybody asks a question whilst I'm going through this. So as I said, it can look a bit complex when you first get a human design chart. What we're going to focus on today is type, strategy, and authority. So wherever you've pulled yours or your child's chart from, you should be able to see those listed in the kind of written synopsis that it gives you. Okay, so you should be able to see where it says type, where it says strategy, and where it says authority. So those are the three things that we're going to focus on today. So these are the two sites that I recommend because they're trusted sites that you pull a chart from. Either one of them, you don't need to do both. Jovian Archive or My Body Graph. There are many other sites as well. There are lots and lots of sites. In fact, now I can't speak for the accuracy of all the different sites. I just would say these two are the most trusted ones. But if you have pulled a chart from another site, then let's just have a look at that for now, and then you can always go back and verify it with one of these sites again. So I'm going to be talking about from the perspective of your child, but obviously this also applies to you as an adult, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a teacher, whoever you are. So human design tells us about ourselves, tells us about our children, tells us about each unique individual that there is. So the type is going to reveal you or your child's inherent nature and how they interact with the world. There are 4 types: manifestor, generator, projector, and reflector. There is also a subtype of a generator, which is called a manifesting generator. So you may see on your chart that you or your child is a manifesting generator. There is some information out there floating around in the internet that may say, you may sometimes see that a manifesting generator is a 5th type. That's actually not correct according to the source material that was channeled. They are a subtype of a generator, and the reason why is I'll explain to you as we go on. So they're not like a hybrid of manifestor and generator. They are a subtype of a generator. There are some slight differences, but they carry a lot of the qualities or attributes, I should say, that a generator does. So there are those 4 types. In terms of, just to get a sort of an idea of like split in the population, approximately 9% of the population are manifestors. Approximately 35% are generators, about 35% are manifesting generators, about 22% are projectors, and 1% of the population is a reflector. Okay. all of the types are designed to work together in harmony. There's no, in human design, there's no like have or don't have, or this is better and that's not so good. Sometimes people look at their charts, and if they see a lot of things that are white, they're like, oh, I don't have that, I'm missing that. And I just want to let you know that we all get to experience all of the energy in a chart through interactions with other people, through different planetary transits. So everything that is in a human design chart or body graph, we're always going to experience all of this energy. But there are certain things within us that are what we call defined, which are fixed and consistent within us, okay? But there's no good, bad, better, worse. So each of the types has a unique energy aura. I presume a lot of you are aware of the term aura, but in case not, I will just briefly explain that your aura is kind of an energy field that's around you, sort of like, I would say invisible, but some people can see auras or feel auras. So it's an energy that's around you. It extends approximately 2 meters out from your body in every direction. So your aura is something that people feel. When you enter a room, people feel your aura. And, you know, people sort of sense it, you know, before you even speak. So I like to say that your aura speaks before you do. And understanding your own or your child's aura can help you to create a nurturing environment that aligns with their natural energy flow. Matilda.
Yes. So Shika is asking in the chat, what if you don't know the exact time of birth of yourself? It could also be your parents.
Brilliant question. So this is something that's very common. One thing I suggest is to try to find out as close as possible. Like, you know, your mother might say, oh, I don't know, I think it was sometime in the evening or the afternoon. Try to find out. Sometimes, depending on where you're from, you may be able to get the records from the hospital. Again, depends where you were born and when and everything. Otherwise, there are a couple of things that you can do. So one is that you can just put in midday. So, you know, where you were born and the date, you just put midday. And then you kind of start like just editing that and kind of playing around. Okay, so you note down what it's saying at midday. And at the moment, we're just kind of looking at that type, strategy, and authority, okay? As I said, it changes some of the other details, but we're just focusing on that right now. So put in midday and then note down what that says, and then go a couple of hours prior to that, you know, like 10 a.m., see what that says, and just kind of go a couple of hours either side and notice if those core parts of it, the type, strategy, and authority, notice if they change or not. There may also be other things that change, like a profile, which is a number in there that looks like a fraction. If it doesn't change, then, you know, again, with this foundational information, you can still follow this. If it does change, then you want to try to get a little bit more of a deeper understanding, because it depends on the day and the time of day as to how much it will change. It can be the difference of 1 minute, and it changes you into a totally different type. It purely depends on when and where you were born and what the planets were doing, because the planets are always going through, you know, all of this part of the human design body graph, all of the 64 gates of the I Ching. And so it just depends on that particular day that you were born, where the planets were and like where they were moving around. If you do find it changes in the day or at multiple times during the day, then another thing that I recommend you do is birth time rectification. So I don't have it to hand, but I will find afterwards a link that I often use, which is kind of like, takes you through almost like a mini questionnaire about events that have happened in your life. And it gives you a list of approximate birth times. I've used that on myself, even though I know my birth time, and it got my birth time to within about 10 minutes. So that is something that you could play around with as well. There are also professional astrologers that do birth time rectification, obviously for a fee. So I hope that helps to answer that. That's a very common question, so thank you for asking that. Okay. So I've talked about the aura. So strategy. So these three things all go together, okay? Every type has the same aura and strategy. So the aura and strategy are linked to the type. Okay, so if you're a manifestor, you always have the same aura, the same strategy. If you're a generator, you have the same aura, the same strategy. So the strategy is about how you or your child can best navigate life with the least resistance. And this is the way that human design was first explained to me when I came into awareness of it. It was like how to go through your life with the least resistance. And I was like, wow, like, wouldn't that be nice to have like a strategy for that? Because who wants to go through their life like bumping into all this resistance, it doesn't mean that everything in your life is going to be rosy and perfect, but it's your way of using this particular strategy that your type has so that you're using your energy correctly and you have less resistance in your life. So again, this is where, you know, even just with this information that we have now, we can see there are 4 types, each with their own corresponding aura, each with their own corresponding strategy. So already we can see there are different ways, that there are ways that we could be very different from our child, you know, even just with this. Okay, there are 4 different possibilities here. And even within that, even if both you and your child are generators, for example, there are so many other things that make this up, but at least that's kind of like, you know, something to start with. So a little bit here, I won't go through these like sort of word for word, because you can read this blog post, and I really want to dedicate a portion of this to answering your questions, but you can always go back and read this blog post. Again, I think Matilda sent this to you. We can send it again if she's sending a follow-up email afterwards. So the manifestor has, I want to explain actually the way in which the types work together, because I think that that can be really useful for an overview. So let's imagine that we had a project where there's a house being built, okay? And this is to get an overview of how the types work together. The manifestors, so remember about 9% of the population, would come in and have this sort of visionary almost idea of what this housing project or this house is going to be like. So they'd be kind of like the architect. They'd have this vision, this idea. They come in and initiate that. They come in and inform the others, okay, these are the things that need to be happening. This is what it's going to be like. This is the vision. Then they step aside. Okay, so manifestors are here, you know, if you have a child that's a manifestor, they're here to be these kind of creative visionaries, these fire starters, these trailblazers. Okay, so they come in, they kind of go, this is the idea. They then ideally hand that off to the generators and manifesting generators, who are here to build things and get things done. They have this, the unique thing of a generator and manifesting generator is they have this sustainable life force energy. They can get things done. Okay, it has to be something that they love doing, because the energy is designed to be devoted to what they love. And side tangent, this is why I think a lot of people are struggling, because 70% of the population are generators, and a lot of people are doing work they don't love, okay, which is causing them to go into their kind of shadow of frustration. So generators, manifesting generators, are like, yeah, you know, I really want to like do this project. They're helping to build the house. They're doing all the things. They're you know, building the bricks. They're doing the wiring, the electrics. They are kind of guided and overseen by the projector, who would act as kind of the project manager. Okay, projectors are here as these guides. They're here particularly to guide generators because of the way that their auras interact with one another. So the projectors are here guiding everybody, guiding the generators. Okay, this goes here, and this is how this is going to happen. So they're like the project managers. Then at the end, when it's finished, the reflectors come in. They're like the interior designers. Reflectors are like the barometer of our community. So they come in and they reflect energy back to us about like what's healthy and what's not. So they come in as the interior designers. They're bringing everything together for it to have this kind of like holistic feeling, or whatever the intention was in the first place. So I hope, again, that gives you like a visual or a metaphor sort of how the types work together. And this very much kind of aligns to, or kind of like leads into really how their auras work. So a manifestor has what's called a closed and repelling aura. I'm a manifestor, and when I was first told that, I was horrified, because I was in a deep conditioning of people pleasing, and I was like, oh, this is why no one likes me, because I had this closed and repelling aura. I want to just make a side note here to say that some of the language, or a lot of the language in human design, can sound shocking. It was designed to, when it came to the forefront in 1987, it was really designed, and the person that channeled it, to shock people into realizing that they were living in their not self, so their sort of shadow, in order to get them to change. So this is why some of the language sounds quite like, and closed and repelling can sound quite like, oh, to someone. The reason that the manifestor has this closed and repelling aura is because they're designed to be this creative visionary. Their aura is designed to protect their energy, because they don't have this unlimited sort of sustainable energy that a generator has. So they're designed to sort of push others away. Now, how this can manifest for a manifested child is they might seem closed, standoffish, don't want to be social, etc., etc. This is what I have witnessed from my own childhood, and also, you know, looking at friends and clients, children who are manifestors as well. So we need to understand a lot about the aura, so we can understand also the type and the strategy and how these things work together. So manifestors are here to basically inform. They're not here to ask permission. They're not here to kind of people please. They're here to execute this creative vision and have an impact. Obviously, there are things we need to take into account when we're raising manifestor children, and I go into more of this in my ebook as well. Generators have an open and enveloping aura. So generators are manifesting generators. Their aura is kind of coming out, and it's almost like a magnet. It's bringing things in. It's coming out and bringing things into them that they can respond to, which is their strategy, is to respond. So some people say, like, but what do I respond to? And it's like, you're never not responding as a generator, because your aura is always working to bring things into you, Where some generators run into resistance is because they have been told, they've been conditioned that they're manifestors and they can just go out and make it happen. But you need to respond to what's coming into you via usually your sacral center, which is that center that has that energy to put, that basically wants to put that energy to use. So you're always bringing things into you, bringing in opportunities and people for you to respond to, like yes, no, yes, no. You don't have to force anything. One of the biggest lessons for a generator, an adult generator, to learn is just to kind of surrender and to trust that the universe will bring them things to respond to. A projector's strategy is to wait for an invitation, and they have a focused and absorbing aura. So they are very much designed to be these guides, okay? They have their aura is quite like piercing. It's designed to pierce into the identity center of another person, particularly the generator, because the generator's aura is open, okay? So the projector can really see into them. And projectors have this unique gift of just really seeing you so deeply. I've had projector coaches and things like that, and it's like, whoa, you've never felt so seen as by a projector, because they're just these really wise guides. However, projector's strategy, again, the strategy is the way of the least resistance in life, is to wait for an invitation. And if a projector has been told, again, oh, just go and make it happen, you can do whatever you want, again, this is more of like a strategy for a manifestor, they're going to run into resistance. Projectors, when they wait for the invitation, they need to wait for the recognition. So they don't accept every and any invitation. They wait so they feel truly recognized and valued by whoever is inviting them. And then they choose whether or not to accept an invitation. If projectors are not invited, and I've witnessed this again in children, both in my own childhood and with clients' children, if projectors are not invited, they can end up pushing for that invitation. And because of the way their aura is, it's that very focused, penetrating, absorbing aura, they can come across as bossy. So I was reflecting recently on one of my childhood friends, and she was always labeled bossy. And I was like, I bet she's a projector. Lo and behold, she's a projector. So it's been very interesting for me now as a parent, reflecting back on friends in childhood and kind of go, and it's like I'm 99% of the time I can pick these things out. Okay, so projectors need to be invited. So again, I have tips in my ebook, and I'm happy to talk about this in further detail, but it's really about, if we understand this about our child, we can start to help them from a young age to recognize what it feels like to be invited to something, what it feels like to be recognized, okay, to give them invitations to things, even if it's like inviting them to dinner, inviting them to come and sit at the dinner table, really simple, practical things like that. And then last but not least, we have the reflector, who, as I said, is only 1% of the population. Their strategy is to wait a lunar cycle, so 28, 29 days for the moon to go through all of the 64 gates of the I Ching. Okay, so that's their strategy, and it also becomes their authority, which is how to make decisions. So reflectors are really amazing, unique beings. They're characterized by having all of their centers open. So if you or your child is a reflector, you'll see all of the 9 centers, which are the shapes, are all white. Okay, this is quite rare. This is only 1% of the population, and they basically are designed to sort of take energy in. I think of them a little bit like a bunny, or like, a bunny like nibbling at a buffet or something. They're sampling everything. Their aura is resistant, so actually they're not really taking it in, but they're sampling things, and they're like with all of this different energy from all the people and the environments around them. Reflectors are incredibly sensitive to their environment, and when I say environment, I'm also talking about people. So if you have a reflector child, there's going to be a couple of things. One, you're really getting a big old lesson from the universe about slowing down, because reflectors really need time and space for themselves to make decisions. If you're someone that's kind of like go, 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 and you have a reflector child, this is going to be a real lesson for you in somebody that's very different from you and needs very, very different things. And so also with a reflector child, it's making sure that they really have a nurturing environment that is very supportive to them. And again, these things can be applied in different ways depending on the age of the child, or the adult, or whoever it might be. And those are things that I can get into in something further, a further discussion. I'm going to touch on the 7 different authorities, and then I'm going to open this up to questions. I see there's lots of comments in the chat already. So we've got the type, which also has a corresponding strategy and aura. Okay. The next part is the authority. Okay. And it's not the usual type of authority, like you do this, and it's not that kind of authority. Okay. It's like, you can think of it as like your inner compass, your inner voice that tells you how to make decisions. We're, I think, all adults here, and I can probably guess that everybody has had an experience here where they've had a feeling internally of perhaps what their decision should be according to their internal wisdom, but they've second guessed themselves, and they've gone up into their little confusing mind, and they've gone, oh, maybe I'm not right. And they've asked other people outside of themselves, what do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? And they haven't trusted, we often say, our intuition or our gut. And then we've maybe gone with other people's advice, and then we've gone, oh, I knew I should have trusted my gut, or I knew I should have trusted my intuition. So we all of us have this inner guidance system, which is how we make decisions. There are 7 different types in human design. Not every one of the energy types, so the 4 energy types, can have one of the 7 different authorities. Okay, some of them only apply to specific types, but here I'm just going to walk you through them briefly. So emotional authority is around about 50% of the population. Okay, this only applies, as applies to most of the types, to manifestors, generators or manifesting generators, and projectors. These 3 types could all have emotional authority. You only have one authority. Okay, so this is all about making decisions according to your emotions. So anyone who has emotional authority, and again, this should be listed in the blurb wherever you've pulled your chart from, it'll say authority. It might say solar plexus, or it might say emotional. They're the same thing. So this is about taking some time to feel through emotions, okay, to feel sort of like this point of clarity. So you're not designed to make decisions when you're like, wow, super excited about something, or when you're like, oh God, no, I'm really not in the mood. You're designed to make a decision when you kind of come to that place of balance where you're not feeling an emotional charge around something. So if we have a child who's an emotional authority, we need to understand that they're going to need time to make decisions, and again, to guide them through just taking a little bit of time before they say yes to something. Matilda.
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. I would just love to take a moment if I can see all of you. I can't see all of you. So I wrote in the chat, please write in the chat, what type are you and what is your child? But maybe also just take hands up, how many generators do we have in here? So can we do that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Generators? How many manifestors? How many projectors? We have a few projectors. Did we have any manifestors but Sophie? I can't see the rest of it.
Can we just stop sharing for a second so we can see who everybody is as well as they add their hands up?
Okay.
Sorry.
Let's try again. Generators. Manifesting generators. I know Anna wrote she was one. Lorian, Venera. Projectors. And manifestors. There we only have Sophie. Were there any reflectors? No. Okay. So the rest are just waiting to do their chat, which is perfectly fine. So, and children, how many have generator children? Yeah. How many have projected children? Tina, I'm so excited. I'm so curious to hear the type of yours after a conversation the other day. And how many have manifested children? Oh, Lorian, you have a manifested child. Exciting.
Nathan's manifestor generator.
Yeah, so good.
So I don't know which one he goes under.
Yeah, it's generator.
Manifesting generator is a subtype of generator.
Yeah. Okay, it was just to get a bit of an overview, but just continue, Sophie. It's so amazing to see. And then I just want to make you aware that we're writing down in the chat and just putting down your type or whatever it is that Sophie is talking about. So you get a bit of
Sophie, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you go back to when you said these 3 types, or so projector was one of them, but they could have these different authorities. There was just a quick sentence there that I totally went over my head.
Yeah,
do you remember?
Of course. Yes, I do. Right, let's go back to this. Dum, dum, dum. Yes, so I'm starting off with emotional authority. And as I was saying, there are 7 different authorities here, which is like our inner guide, our inner compass about how we make decisions or how our children make decisions. Emotional authorities, approximately 50% of the population have this. As I was saying, you only have one authority. So again, this should be listed in wherever you've pulled your chart from. 3 of the types could have emotional authority. So this is manifestors, generators, and the subtype of manifesting generators, and projectors, okay? Reflectors only ever have one type of authority. They have this one at the bottom here, lunar authority, because that goes along with that strategy of waiting for a lunar cycle, okay? So emotional authority, as I was saying, and it might say solar plexus, depending on where you pulled your chart from, is about taking time to make decisions. So if you or your child have emotional authority, which again, probably 50% if you would, I love that you just did that with Matilda and, you know, show, again, because I was saying with visual, you know, showing who's what. You're not designed to make spontaneous decisions. You need to take some time to just feel through your emotions. So this is something to be aware of if this applies to you or your child. And again, the reason I think this is, I mean, apart from this being an important part of human design, is this allows us, making decisions is such an important part of our life, right? We're going to have to go through life knowing how to make decisions correctly as ourselves. You might be very different from your child, okay? So you could have the same type, for example, but you might have a different authority, a different way to make decisions. So if we're unaware of this, we could, like, you know, unintentionally condition our child who perhaps needs time to make decisions, kind of go, why can't you just decide? Like, you're so indecisive, because we know how to make instant decisions. Or, and this happened with someone recently with one of my clients, she was like, oh, I was just telling my brother, like, he shouldn't make rash decisions and he should just take his time. And I said, yeah, because your emotional authority, you need to take your time. Your brother is different. He actually should make spontaneous decisions and trust his gut. So you can see again where this, you know, regardless whether it's parents, children, siblings, friends, we always see parents to see the world through our own lens, through our own experience. And so even with the best intention, even though we're, you know, want to be conscious parents and aware, intentional, gentle parents, we might still do something that isn't in the best interest of our child without this knowledge. Okay, so I feel like this, like I said, it goes hand in hand with being a conscious parent. It's like the icing on the cake for me. The second one, sacral authority, or sacral maybe if you're American. Sacral authority, this only applies to generators or manifesting generators. Remembering manifesting generators are a subtype of generator. The reason this only applies to those and no other type is because having a defined sacral center, which is the one second up from the bottom, which I can show you on a chart in a moment, that is what makes someone a generator or manifesting generator. When you're looking at the shapes in the human design body graph, if you have a manifestor, projector, or reflector, they will never have that sacral center defined. It's the square one, the second one up from the bottom. They will never have that defined. So sacral authority is kind of usually a bit more of an instant decision making. It's that strong gut response, okay? And it's kind of like, remember I was saying the aura is pulling things in, so it's kind of responding like yes or no. These people do well with being asked closed questions when it comes to making decisions, because it's that gut response. It's kind of on, off, yes, no. By closed questions, I mean things that only elicit a yes or no answer. So I have a son who's a manifesting generator, and I will pretty much all the time ask him questions that elicit a yes or no answer. Do you like this? Do you want to wear this? Do you want to eat that? You know, do you want grapes? Do you want this? Rather than kind of going, what do you want to eat? Bear in mind, he's only 2 as well. So rather than when you ask when it comes to making decisions, especially like big life changing decisions, when you ask someone who's a sacral authority an open question, it's like, what would you like to do? Where would you like to go? They get flustered because they're not designed to respond in an open way like that. They go up into their mind and then they get confused and they're like, I don't know, or they make a wrong decision, okay? Before I go on, I should mention as well, so if you have a generator or manifesting generator child, or you are one yourself, you could have you would have a defined sacral, definitely, but you might have emotional authority. So this is almost like you are going to be feeling that sort of yes, no gut feeling from your sacral But if you have an emotional authority, that always is this is like a hierarchy. So that's always going to kind of trump you having a sacral center. Does that make sense? So you might feel this gut feeling, and you still need to take your time when making an important life-changing decision. Okay. So again, using my son as an example, he's a manifesting generator. He has a defined sacral center, but he has emotional authority. So I do ask him for simple day-to-day things, closed questions, yes, no. I haven't asked him many things about his, life-change decisions yet, because he's only almost going to be 2, but I will have that awareness when it comes to the time of when it's going to be an important decision, to really encourage him to take his time to think about something, not think about something, to feel into something, whether it's to do with school or like going to a party or whatever it might be. Okay. Moving on to splenic authority. So this is, boom, spontaneous. This is based on the splenic center, which is the oldest center in the human design body graph out of those 9 shapes that we have there. This is primal, instinctive, intuitive knowing. It shouldn't be questioned. So sometimes, if you or your child has splenic authority and you're like, how can they just decide so quickly? Like, how do they just know that? You really need to trust them. If you ask a splenic authority child, like, but what, how did you know that? Like, why did you know? You're going to make them start to question themselves, when it's really this instinctive, primal, intuitive, like, yes or no, okay, or whatever it might be. They don't even know. It's just, it's a really bodily based felt awareness, okay? Then we have becoming rarer and rarer now, self-projected, I should mention splenic authority could apply to manifestors or projectors, okay? So generators and manifesting generators will only have emotional or sacral authority. We then come on to self-projected authority. This is only for projectors. That's the only type that can have self-projected authority. They have this innate sense of like who they are. They just know who they are. And so their decision-making comes from that, this sort of sense of identity, this sense of self. They just know who they are. So again, this is just like not questioning them, not asking how they know that. They very often want to kind of vocalize things. So they want to sort of talk things through. They don't need to be interrupted. They just need this space to kind of talk through what's going on as an internal process within them. So they can almost sort of like hear what they say, or they can just kind of like almost get this energy out when they're making a decision. Okay. But again, they shouldn't be interrupted or given advice unless they specifically ask for that. Okay. So it's almost like holding space for them just to kind of like vocalize things. And then they're kind of like, okay, I know what to do now. I know what my decision is. And then they kind of like, go off on their way. Ego authority is very rare, about 1% of the population. This is either projectors or manifestors. I have ego authority. So this is kind of also often, and it can be slightly different for projectors and manifestors, but it's kind of really just having this innate sense of what you want. Like, it's kind of described as like heart-led as well. In my personal experience, it can be seen as being selfish as a child. It's kind of, as a child, they might be like, I want that, I want that, I want that. And again, in our conditioning, we might perceive that as being selfish. However, there's a greater purpose behind it. Like, it's usually that that person wants that because they see a way to use it to help others. So I was unfortunately conditioned a lot as a child, bless my mom. I was told, I want doesn't get. Again, something that maybe seems harmless and probably with the best of intentions to not make me kind of greedy or egotistical, but it was correct for me as a child to say I want. And that unfortunately was conditioned out of me. Again, this is not any way to kind of like, when we're learning this, to kind of blame our parents or our teachers. It's just having that awareness. I totally understand why my mother said that without this awareness, but it was kind of unfortunate that that was actually really an innate part of me and a natural way of how I spoke. I wasn't trying to be selfish, but then having this kind of conditioning, like, oh God, am I selfish? Like, I then went massive people pleasing. I'm going to do everything I can not to be selfish. And this is what children do, because we need the love from our caregivers. So if something is, not acceptable, we'll go completely the other direction. And we learn this predominantly in the first 7 years of our life. So this has and still is something that I'm working through at the age of even 42 now. It has such a strong impact. And this is why I have such a passion for working with parents, so particularly with young kids under the age of 7. I mean, all kids, but particularly that, because it's so apparent to me from my professional and personal experience that this is where this core conditioning happens in those first 7 years of life. Even regardless of what, scientists say about this and how the brain works, like I know from my personal experience as well and experience of others, it really is, those first 7 years is like so precious. And it doesn't mean if your children are older than that there's not things you can do. Of course there still is, but the earlier the better. The best time to get your child's human design chart is at birth. The second best time is now. Then even smaller minority, we've got mental authority. This is just the realm of projectors. Sometimes on a chart, again, depending where you pull it from, it might say none or outer authority, or it might say sounding board. Children who are mental projectors, again, I think it's about 1 or 2% of the population, really need to be able to, they take it in a lot of things. They've got a lot of openness. They're taking in a lot of energy, and they need to be able to sort of process. It's not really what's going on in their mind, but it's kind of what they've taken in from their environment. So again, they need sort of someone that's a safe space for them to be a sounding board, so that they can talk things through and they can kind of come to decision. They can just hear themselves speak. Okay, so again, it's not giving advice, it's not interrupting them, it's being that sounding board so they can kind of almost reflect those things back to you. And then last but not least, we have lunar authority, which, as I said, only belongs to reflector types. And it's this, the energy changes for a reflector, the energy changes every day. And every 28 days, they'll go through the moon will go through the 64 gates of the Chinese I Ching in the same order every month. Okay, so it's always going through. So if you have a reflected child, I don't think anyone here does, but perhaps on the recording, there are things you can do to start to track their energy when you understand, like, where what gates they have to find, so the numbers that you see, and kind of like how the moon is moving through the order of the gates. You can start to track things, so you can start to kind of understand they're going to be feeling a similar way at a similar time of the month, a little bit like having, a menstrual cycle as well. They might kind of have these patterns that they're going through, so that can be super helpful. Okay, right, let's dive into questions, and I'm also available for any further questions. I have a free Facebook group for those of you that are on Facebook. You're welcome to pop in there and ask me questions, or send them to Matilda and she can send them on to me, or however you want to do it. So if we do run out of time, then I'm still more than happy to answer your questions, or those of you also that are watching the recording, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that might come up for you. So Matilda, I don't know if should I just go through the chat, or is there any questions that you picked out there?
I think we should open it up for new questions. So I think most of them, I've been raising my hand if I felt it. There's a lot of fun things, but there are really a lot of comments. But because we've been like working with whatever you were talking about, like writing down, people could write down their authority of the children and so on. So I suggest we just open to new questions, because I'm sure that this has given birth to some new question that people will have. Am I right? I can see Carrie's hand is already there. Anderson. So I will just leave it up to you, Sophie. And also, we said maybe 10 minutes over, but not more than that, right? Okay. So I will let it up to you now to take the questions.
Okay. Anna, I can see you raised a hand, and then I'll do Carrie first, and then Anna, then, since you just unmuted.
Okay. So my question is, I'm both my son and I are sacral authorities. So I like that we're so close, because I can better understand him by understanding myself. So thank the heavens for that. And anyway, but what I've realized about myself is I feel like in life, people have teased me because I'm always like, no, not that. And then later I change my mind and I regret saying no. But I feel like my first reaction's often a no. And if I listen to this, I should trust that. But somehow then, like, I think it's because I want to be a part of the group, or I'm like, I like what they're eating. Then I'm like, oh, why was I a no so quick?
So you had kind of like a fear of missing out, like afterwards. You're like, oh, like, okay.
Yeah, I wonder about that. So I don't know. Like my son, when he knows immediately and he doesn't ever waver. He never changes his mind. What he is right away, it doesn't matter. He will not change his mind afterwards. But I don't feel like I have that in me.
And this is where it's really beautiful to look at. How old is your son?
He's 10.
This is where I find it really beautiful to look at children and then adults. So I spent many years working with adults, as I said, as a therapist, incorporating their human design. When I recently ran a program I do on parenting by human design, a lot of people were like, oh, but my child already does that. And it's like, yeah, if they're young and they haven't been highly conditioned, it's kind of like, oh, they already do that. Now, as adults, we've obviously been conditioned. I don't believe there's any one of us that hasn't, obviously in different ways, depending on, how we were brought up. So, witnessing that in your son is amazing. There's going to be lots of other different aspects of your design, again, without going into sort of all the details. There's so many layers, it's really like an onion, that are going to mean that you are different. But in terms of just you making decisions, what I find with a lot of adults who have a sacral authority is they become disconnected from it. This usually happens during childhood. Another thing to mention about generators and manifesting generators is they typically make what's called sacral sounds. So they might not say yes or no, they might be like, Oftentimes that can get conditioned out of children because it's like, use your words, speak properly. Like, no, it's not, it's yes. So often that can get conditioned out of children quite early on. And it's something I've observed with my son, who was quote unquote late to talk. And I'm like, he makes the most incredible sounds though. And I know this about him, so I'm not going to put pressure on him to speak correctly. Anyway, tangent. So what you might find with yours is it could be a couple of things. You may be disconnected from your sacral authority. Okay, that's very common for adults. Or you may have conditioning that is kind of like causing you to just basically like second guess yourself. Okay. So one way, if you are an adult, if you want to kind of reconnect to your sacral authority, you could kind of do what's called, you could maybe do it for yourself, or you can get somebody else to sort of facilitate this for you. You can do like a sacral session. So if you have something you want to make a decision about and you're like, oh, you're all up in your head, like, should I go to this conference or not? Like, I'm not sure what to do. Get someone to sit down with you and ask you a series of mundane questions. So I'll demonstrate it with you, Carrie, now. Is there a window behind you?
No.
Is there a painting behind you?
Yes.
Are you wearing glasses?
Yes.
Is your hair up?
No.
Is your hair down?
Yes.
And so you kind of just go through a series of really mundane, boring questions where the person just answers yes or no, or And then when it feels like they're just kind of like, they're really sort of in their body and they're like, dun, 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 then you get them to ask you the question that you're wanting to decide over. If you pause and you think, or your eyes move and you go up into your head, it means you've come out of your body, out of your sacral center, and you're trying to answer from your mind. So you want to remember, as a generator, you're always dropping into your body. And it's just, it might even, I don't have a defined sacral, but it's described often. It might even be like a pull towards something, or feeling pushed away from something, or it might be an expansion or a contraction in your body. So again, kind of feeling into your body. And it probably, I would make a guess that probably your decision was correct, but there's something in conditioning in your mind that's like, oh, now I'm missing out on that opportunity, or whatever it might be. But it's really interesting for you to witness and observe your son and just see sort of how instant it is.
Thank you.
Debbie, eyes kind of going up. It's something, we can use this for using NLP, or if we're looking at when somebody's lying or they're thinking. You'll notice if you ask someone a question, they kind of go, and their eyes go up. It's a sign that they've gone up into their mind very often and they're thinking about something. And we never want to be making decisions from our mind in human design. Never, never. Always from our authority. Anna, I'd love to take your question.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much. This was really, really interesting. I've been really drawn to human design recently. So I'm a manifesting generator, and I just want to reflect something. So I'm a manifesting generator, and my authority is emotional solar plexus. And I completely agree. Like, I make decisions on impulse a lot. Like, I get the high and I'm like, oh my God, I got to do this right now. Like, I don't wait. And I know one of the things is to wait overnight. But with my authority, I'm almost tempted a lot to do like quick decisions, and I do that. So I have kind of started learning to like wait it out a little bit before like taking action. And then my son, he's sacral and he's a generator. And I also agree with that. Like he likes questions more specific, like let's say, what food do you want to eat? This specific food or this one or this one? When I give him choices and I actually mention them, he can make a decision easier. And then my question is, so I think you mentioned that the emotional could be solar plexus or sacral, if I'm correct. And I was wondering if you could explain the difference, because both sacral and solar plexus hold emotions. So I was wondering if you could explain the difference.
No, sorry if that was confusing. So what I meant was that a generator or manifesting generator will always have a defined sacral center, okay? But they could have emotional authority. So slightly disconnect. If you're aware about chakras, there's a slight difference in the human design system with sort of like how they work, okay? So the solar plexus is the is the center which governs emotions, okay? Doesn't mean if you don't have it defined, you don't have emotions, but again, that's something else to get into. So if somebody is an emotional authority, but they're a generator or manifesting generator, what I was saying, or what I meant to say, was that they will still feel that gut response, that sacral center, remember, they're always drawing something in. So it's drawing it into the sacral center. The sacral center responds yes or no. But if they have emotional authority, this becomes like a hierarchy. So even though their sacral center might kind of give them a yes or a no, they still need to take their time before they make a decision. Okay. So emotional authority is always the one that, in terms of the hierarchy, it kind of trumps everything else. Emotional authority always take time to make decisions, even if you have a defined spleen, even if you have a defined sacral center. Those two centers are kind of more spontaneous, but the emotional authority needs time. So anyone with an emotional authority or defined solar plexus needs to take their time. Okay. Does that clarify?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
And yes, for you, it's just going to be a lesson in, if you make spontaneous decisions, they may work out well, but they may not. It sort of depends almost on the luck of the draw. But ideally, you should be sleeping on it, taking your time, and just allowing. There's no sort of set amount of time sleeping on it. At least one night would be good. It might be something that takes longer. It depends on the decision. Christine.
Thanks, Sophie. This has been wonderful and so elucidating. And I've been super drawn to human design also since maybe July, so I'm fairly new. In terms of the emotional authority, I'm wondering if there is somewhere, do you feel if it's the right decision or the wrong decision in your aura or your emotional body? Like, like a lot of times you're drawn to your, a lot of spiritual thought leaders will say, listen to your heart, tune into your heart. Or, if it's a gut response, you tune into your gut, which is your second brain. So I haven't quite understood where to feel it. Like, where should I feel a yes or a no?
You have emotional authority yourself?
I do, and both of my girls do.
So there's something, again, which I can share with Matilda if she reminds me. There's a little graphic that I have about, I may even have done it on Instagram, I'm not sure. Emotional authority can be slightly different in the way that it's felt or experienced, depending on, you'll see the lines between centers, okay? And there's lines, they could be red or black or half red, half black. Depending on which ones of those are colored in or defined is going to mean that it's slightly different, okay? So even though you and both your daughters have emotional authority, the way in which that is felt and expressed might feel different. Again, it's another sort of slightly deeper layer, but it's a great question. I don't have that. So again, I can't say from a personal experience, but it's basically that you are, regardless of how it's defined, everyone who has an emotional authority is designed to just be on this, just feeling emotions all the time. And you're on like what's referred to often as a wave. Okay, so you've always got this wave of emotions going through your body. The reason why you're supposed to take time to wait out the decision is because if, like Anna was just saying, you're like at this high point of your wave and you're like, oh my God, I'm so excited. Oh my God, that sounds amazing. It might not be correct for you, okay? Because you need to feel through almost like a full wave to make a decision. So you'll get to know this as you get to know yourself better. You might be up here and you're like so excited. And then you might come down here and be like, oh God, no, I really don't want to do that. So you could be here when the initial opportunity comes to you. You want to wait till you're sort of like in that middle part where the ocean is a little bit more calm. It's still going to be little ups and downs because you're never not going to feel emotions. And it's often said for people who have emotional authority, you might only ever get 80% clarity. So you might not ever be like 100% clear on a decision, but you're waiting until you've kind of like felt through that wave. If you're like a kind of a yes at first, and then the next day or a couple of days later you still feel a strong yes, then it's good. You know, you can enter into that with a certain amount of clarity that that's going to be correct for you. If you're a no, and then the next day, a couple of days later, you're still a no, same thing. This is not for like what you want to eat for lunch, but this is for big life-changing decisions, okay? Or, you know, going to school, even for your kids going to a party or something like that, it still applies, I would say. The problem or potential problem arises is if you're kind of like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, you know, because you haven't allowed yourself that time. Now, I also want to say, if you or your children have emotional authority, give yourself grace to change your mind. Because there are also some aspects of having emotional authority, again, depending on how it's defined, where it's important with some people that they honor if they're feeling in the mood, if they're feeling social or not. And again, I can describe this in more detail, or you can send me the charts and I can kind of identify specific things for you. My son has this, so I know, again, as he grows up, if he says yes to a party that's in 3 weeks' time, I am going to check in with him on the morning of that party and going, do you still feel like going? And if he says no, I'm going to be like, okay, that's cool. I'm not going to be like, but you said you were going to go, You have to stick to your decision. Because emotional authority, even when you've made the decision, if it's something in the future, again, your emotional wave is up, down all the time. So I think this is something really important to be aware of with children, that we give them, and ourselves, that we give ourselves, our children, grace and permission to change their mind, particularly with emotional authorities. So again, going back to the question about like how it's felt in the body, it is going to be different from, you know, person to person. It's really, I suppose it's probably, it could be anywhere in your body, but it's probably going to be feeling sort of just like, you know, either feeling really excited or feeling kind of a bit more melancholic, or just kind of feeling like a sense of being calm emotionally. I'm not sure if I can really sort of pinpoint a particular area of the body, but, you know, again, this might be different for different people as to kind of where, you know, where you might feel your emotions. Does that help?
Yeah, it does help. Thank you so much. It does. I do find, I love what you said about giving your children or yourself grace to change your mind. I'm finding it a little bit tricky in the modern world to implement some of those things, because I am conditioned also, like, if you make a commitment, then you make a commitment, you're going to go, you know, obviously. So that also, I find I need to decondition, and then also help my own kids be able to change their mind as well. But
yeah, there's also aspects to that as well. There's one particular center, again, like I said, there are so many layers. There's one particular center which is really about making commitment, which is the ego center. Only about 30% of the population have that defined, 30%. So actually the rest of the 70% of you that don't, I do have it defined, which is why I said to Matilda, I wasn't feeling well today, but I was like, I've made a commitment, I'm sticking to it, because actually for me, that's very important. For a lot of people, it's not, right? 70% of the population are not here to have consistent willpower, consistent determination. They're not here to make commitments, yet there's so much conditioning around that. And what that means is when people are conditioned like that, is they go into the not self, or the shadow of trying to prove themselves, trying to be competitive. And I see this in so many places. It starts as young as being at school, where we're competing with, you know, children are competing with each other and who's top of the class and that kind of thing. And it's not correct for 70% of the population to be like that. So, you know, there might be, you may have a defined ego or will center. So you actually making commitments might be correct for you. Again, it might not. It's so nuanced. My son, for example, has that. And I know that kind of the emotional authority still kind of just, like I said, trumps everything else. So even though he has a defined ego or will center, and he quote unquote should make commitments, I will still, because the emotions are strong, always going to go back and ask him, you know, how do you feel? Do you still want to go? Okay, because I know that that's kind of like of utmost importance if we're looking at things kind of in a pyramid, for example.
Thank you.
Beautiful, Sophie. It has been such an amazing hour just listening to your wisdom. And I believe we are at the end of the call now, even though there might be a lot more questions. So that is a good reason to ask you to share some ways to connect with you more. I don't know, do you want to do it this way, or I can send an email out to everyone? So maybe just say briefly, and then I will send links and so on in the email with the replay.
Okay, I'll just pop these in here now, but I have my website is just my name, so sophiedubus.com, and then I have a Facebook group which is called Raising Kids by Human Design. That's free. You can come in there and ask your questions. You can connect with me on my Instagram is can't spell, Coach Sophie is my Instagram. You can connect with me in whatever way feels good for you. As I said earlier, I've got an ebook which is available if you want to kind of dive into this a little bit more depth. I've got a class I did recently. I've got a course coming up in January. I've got some stuff coming up next year, which is going to be more deconditioning for parents. So lots and lots of things coming up. The ebook is available on my website, Debbie. But again, I think Matilda will send the links out. Tell it's getting late now. But yeah, I so love answering questions about this. As I was saying to Matilda, people say manifestors hate questions. I don't. About this, I genuinely love it. I'm so excited about it all the time because I really, really, as Matilda does, this is why we connected together. I really deeply care about our impact on the children of this world. And that's so, so important to me. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing for our children. Not for you guys, sorry. I'm kidding. For you guys too, but no, but really for the children. The way to reach the children is through the parents. I care about all of you.
They're the grown children.
It can be so easy with our kids because, like I said, if we get them before they're conditioned, it's just kind of like, oh, well, they do that already. You know, it's often us, which is why I'm going to be doing more work for parents next year. It's often us that like we need to go through the things we need to decondition. But once we're aware of our conditioning, we can avoid passing that on to our kids.
Yeah. So beautiful. Thank you, Sophie. It's time. I think it's your bedtime, not our bedtime yet. And so much is starting their day. But just to make sure we don't use all of your energy, it's been so lovely to have you here. And we were so happy you wanted to come and share in this community. And I know a lot more than that will watch this video later on. And please feel free to just send feedback and questions and everything that comes up during this re-listening to this conversation, and I will send out ways to communicate with Sophie. Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. Love you all. Bye.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to meet you.
Yeah.